everybody, my name is Axel Villamil. Welcome back to 24 Shades of Blue. We're here with the amazing Valerie Dahan, or in French, Dahan, Detective Constable, Toronto Police Services, Financial Crimes Unit, Asset Forfeiture Unit, and none other joining us, Shawn Marshall, Detective. He's here, Cybercrime Center. How are you both today?
Excellent. How are you?
Shawn, you doing good?
Absolutely.
Great. I'm glad to have you two here. It was a mission for us to all actually meet. As you know, state of the world, Canada, Ontario especially, is on another 3 times the charm lockdown for fun. But we're here, being safe in our respective homes and in HQ, obviously staying safe there. So I'm glad we're doing this safely. So we have 2 very different topics, cybercrime and fraud. But also there's some overlap that goes on. And now this is actually, to correct me, first time, Valerie, that you're meeting or seeing Shawn for the first time, but you've worked with him.
Yeah, no, in theory we work together, but completely different buildings. And yes, this is the first time I see Shawn's face. He took a sneak peek at me, but this is my first time meeting Shawn. So.
Shawn, is this your first time seeing Valerie too?
Actually, yeah, there's a lot of people that we end up working with on a regular basis, but you only know them through phone and email. So this video conferencing is nice to at least be able to connect with people a slightly different way if we can't meet up in person.
Absolutely. I think you two were ahead of the curve when it came to COVID connecting. So we were all behind. You two were already ahead in terms of communications in that way. So, well, we know that there's a lot of similarities, but let's talk about differences first. So, let's start with you, Valerie. What's the differences on your end between what Shawn does? And could you just give us a, general background for the public of what, fraud is in your end? And then we can go with cybercrime, Shawn, on your end too, and then see where we overlap.
I mean, really, you would think fraud and cybercrime kind of go hand in hand, but I mean, Shawn's the expert when it comes to cybercrimes, but, cybercrime obviously happens in cyberspace, and fraud, on the other hand, happens absolutely everywhere. It happens in cyberspace, but it happens at your front door, it happens over the phone, happens through your email, on your cell phone, absolutely anywhere. So when you're dealing with fraud, you can't just think in a silo. Fraud's one of those things. It's people used to think that it's kind of the crime of the future, but it's the crime of the past, and it's 100% here, and it's never going anywhere. And it's kind of one of those devastating things when you think about frauds. And there's some misconceptions that are kind of interested about frauds. People think it's a victimless crime. They think it's a white-collar crime, but it's an actually devastating crime. And I had a judge say in one of my trials in the past at a sentencing, he said that fraud erodes trust within society. And if you've been a victim of fraud, that you're not shaking that, right? Your personal relationships that you've had with people have gone into your life, and then all of a sudden, through one way or another, your finances are disrupted. Everything is flipped on its head.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's far from victimless. And sort of like, I'm a bit of a passionate fraud investigator, fraud nerd, whatever you want to call me. But I'm always there for my victims, because fraud will change your life forever.
Watch out. Valerie's going to be on the next Netflix, bad boy millionaires type of thing. And she's going to be, providing the evidence. But it's true. I think, I get scared when, obviously we've all seen things with fraud happen, especially online, or examples of them. It's just picking up the phone to a random number now is actually quite scary. And I think that's, a great segue into, Shawn, what you do is that I've heard even cases where, let's say if I just say hello or I say the word yes, that's recorded and can be used, towards other identification, spaces. So Shawn, let's chat about you, and how you see that crossover, obviously with what Valerie does, but also the differences.
I guess when it comes to cybercrime, there's so many of them. Like Val said, there's a lot of different kinds of fraud out there, and some of it's on the internet and some of it's in person. When it comes to crime in general, a lot of it on the internet, it ends up getting categorized between technology as an instrument and technology as a target. So you've got technology as an instrument crimes, which would be like cyber harassment and cyberbullying and a lot of online frauds. But then our office also deals with technology as a target, where we've got things like malware and actual hacking and data exfiltration and things like that. So there's definitely some crossover in the technologies and instrument end of things, because these guys are committing fraud, any way that they can. And the internet has opened up this whole new avenue for them.
Absolutely. I feel like both of your topics, Val, when you're talking about, fraud, you're following the money, you're following, whatever numbers are going around and looking for those people. And in comparison to Shawn, you're following, bits and bytes at that point, really looking for specific people through the underworld of the digital world. And, would you both say is it equally as hard to find your perp? Is it more difficult for one? What's your opinion here?
It's, in my opinion, it's different. And what's interesting, and I'm sure actually it overlaps into Shawn's world, when it comes to fraud, sometimes we tend to be reactive in certain ways because, we've got our bad guys who are coming up with these different scams and schemes. And then it's a matter of us educating ourselves to say, okay, how did this work? What's their end game? And how do we get there? How do we prove what happened? So we're educating ourselves, reaching out to all sorts of different industries and figuring out how things work. And I'm sure it's in the cyberspace, it's the same way. You can't really anticipate what's coming next. And then, it emerges, and COVID, created its own challenges, but we react, we adapt, and we try our best to in the end, come to some sort of conclusion to figure out, that's the way they were perpetrating this fraud. And this is the evidence that are required to prove it, so that down the road, it's going to be a conviction, right? Some sort of closure, some sort of end game for our victims.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of crossover with what we do because it ends up being a lot of production orders that we write. Probably both of us. A production order is basically like a search warrant for documents, like for bank records or for internet connection information as well. So we end up getting a lot of information from our victims up front. They'll have like some records and some logs that we can use to get started. But then in the end, we end up writing a lot of production orders for that sort of internet connection information and sending those all over the world. So it's the same but different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you both touch on COVID as well. And have you seen a rise in both sides in terms of, I guess, the number of crimes that are happening in your respective fields because of COVID? Everybody's at home. I know I'm eating a lot of cookies. So does that mean there's a lot more people on their computer, committing fraud or, doing cyber crimes?
I was amazed at how quickly the scammers pivoted to COVID. They started working COVID-related stuff into their frauds very, very quickly. They registered like a bunch of personal protective equipment domains and things like that. They were sending people emails about vaccines before they were available to the public. They really pivoted towards frauds in the cyberspace. Anyway, they pivoted towards COVID-related frauds very, very quickly. I don't know if there's more fraud. I think it's the same amount. They just changed how they do it. A lot of people started working from home. And so bad guys started leveraging the fact that they're working from home, and maybe business practices are a little bit looser because you can't just go and ask your boss the question. Now you have to set up a meeting and call them and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
As well as some cybersecurity vulnerabilities in the way that people work from home too.
They're sneaky, Shawn. They're sneaky. They got me bad. They were about to get me bad. They didn't get me. Let's be clear, everybody. They didn't get me because I know you too. I'm not gonna. I can handle myself. But they did a great one, and I'm gonna tell you the example of it. So we do a lot of shipping with our equipment, to other guests like yourselves. We ship equipment over, and they caught me at a perfect time. I almost clicked on that link too because I had to get a package from the U.S. So I guess they were just timing it based off of, packages coming in and out. They're like, oh, you have a package held at the border, which I actually did a couple days ago. And I was like, for some reason, I'm like, do we have another one? Did I forget about something that's held over there? And I'm like, this looks weird. I'm like, what is this? Is it IPS? And I'm like, what is this thing? So, I looked it up. And I checked, and they're like, "Oh, it's a scam. It's a scam to to pay a certain fee to get your quote unquote package, et cetera, et cetera." So it was pretty close. And I mean, for both of you, and I know I'm segueing right now. Should we feel bad if we ever fall for this? Because I've had a bunch of people fall for it. Like, all honesty, should we feel bad? Like, what should we do to prevent ourselves from getting in these situations on both ends?
So it's interesting that you ask, should I feel badly, right? It's one of those things. I don't know how many times a victim has turned to me after it's come out.
Yeah.
And it's come to light. Yes, now they're a victim of a fraud. They're dealing with it. And they say, I just feel so stupid.
That's exactly
That's the first thing that comes out of their mouth. And then you have to stop them and say, no, No, don't feel stupid for being a good person. If you're a good person, you're going to trust that everybody else is a good person. They have, the best, the best, everything at heart for you, right? They want you to succeed. It's those bad guys out there that are creeping in and they victimize you. And now you feel stupid because you click that link. You're thinking, hey, that parcel is mine. Click. And you go, geez, I really shouldn't have. And the next thing you know, you're getting emails and texts from people saying, hey, you've been hacked, right? Because you clicked that link. And then you just feel like a fool, right? You just feel so badly. But it's one of those things in life. If you're a trusting person, you're going to fall for these things. We try our best. We try to educate. We lecture regularly to the public. We lecture to other officers so that they can pass it on to other people. Last month of March, every year is Fraud Prevention March. We try to get the word out through social media, through awareness blitzes, through the media and different campaigns. A podcast like this can't hurt. Yep. Somebody's listening to it. Learn something and pass it on to two other people who will
Don't
pass
click
it
the
on
link.
to two other
Don't do it. Right? Don't click the link.
But there are little things you can do. Shawn knows more when it comes to verifying certain addresses and things like that, but we lecture about that as well. But, if you get that email and you're thinking, is this legit? It looks legit. If you read it carefully, sometimes you'll see some typos. Some pretty obvious typos that you go, yeah, okay, you know what? This reputable agency wouldn't have made this typo. They would have read this 3 times before posting it. But then when you look, before clicking on that link, if you look at the actual sender's address, it might look like it's coming from Axel. Yeah, that looks right. But then when you click the address, no, it's not coming from Axel.
No.
Come from a whole bunch of different letters at whatever, netflax.com, right? It's not Netflix. So, you can try to do your due diligence a little bit. And if you're not sure, just wait, pause, think a little bit, ask somebody else, ask a friend, should I be clicking on this? Most people tell you, just don't click, man. Just don't click.
Absolutely.
Right?
Shawn, what about you?
Yeah, I'm dealing with a fraud right now where they registered a new domain. So if it was netflix.com, for instance, they registered Netflix, but they changed the I to a 1.
Oh.
And if you look at it really quickly, you're probably not going to notice.
Yeah.
And it looks legit. And then you use the logos and everything else. I never blame the victims for falling for these things because, as Val said, if you're a good person, you believe other people are good as well. And so you're going to click on these things.
Of course.
And even if you make a mistake, even if you're acting out of greed and someone says you can double your money in 24 hours, that still doesn't mean that these things should happen to you. It's never a victim's fault.
Absolutely. So, let's get more into the victims. I think a lot of people would assume that, it's an older generation that would be targeted more because there's a lack of tech savviness. But, I know somebody, in their late 20s, mid 30s that was, was a victim of fraud because they were just in a financial situation where they were scared of, the government doing something, or they had to pay a specific fee and they didn't want money taken out of their account. But then that happened and it was even worse. So, let's talk about the range of these victims. Who could it be? And also, I guess for, at least me, let's say I got parents who don't know about these things. What should I tell them? How should I educate them?
Shawn and I chatted about this previously, and I liked his answer a lot.
Yeah, no, please, no, let's elaborate more because you did. Because I was like, I just feel like, you don't want to be like, hey, mom and dad, like, don't, these are the things, don't click. Like, how can we guide them? How do we, like the resources you said, but what else can we do in terms of, I guess we can't be there all the time.
You can't be, you can't check on everyone all the time. The victims that I see are everybody, male, female, every walk of life. Every identifier you can think of, everyone falls victim to these things. The people think the elderly are more of a target, but it's happening to millennials. It's happening to everybody as well. I think the bad guys generally prey on fear and greed and lust. And so as long as you fall into one of those 3 categories, where you've ever felt one of those 3 things in your life, you're a potential victim of one of these things. The only thing you can really do is tell people to trust, but verify. That's something that gets said in cybersecurity a lot. Believe what people are telling you, but if Netflix sends you an email and says your account's behind, click here to make a payment, close the email, go into your Netflix account the way you normally would and see if you actually owe money that way. Trust that something is wrong, but verify it through another way to make sure that it's actually legit.
Absolutely.
It would be amazing if there was a typical fraud victim, because then we could just target that audience, right? And say, okay, let's fix the problem, and fraud is eradicated, and we never have to worry about it again. And I'll find somewhere else to work, right?
Yeah.
But alas, that's not the case. Just like Shawn said, like his first answer to me was humans. Humans are the victims, right? And I was like, hey, you know what? You're right. So it's absolutely. And you think, yeah, the elderly, maybe they'll be a little bit more at risk, but they're not. Like I remember I lectured to 150 elders once, and after the presentation, they all came up to me with their cell phones. And they said, you said to not write down my passwords. How else do I do this? Where do I keep it? What do I do? So they really want to know. They don't want to be in that trap after their money is gone. Yeah. And they go, now what do I do? Right. So they're trying really hard. And there are others who are kind of like flippant about it, but they're not flippant about it. They really work hard. Are they a little bit more vulnerable when it comes to the fact that they could be isolated at times, especially during COVID times when they're maybe allowed to visit one family?
Yeah.
And the rest of the time they might be on their own, or they may have their spouse with them. So that, and things like that. And perhaps they're not technologically savvy, but you know what? At my age, don't let the grays fool you, right? I'm 25, but at my age, you think.
First off, let's make it clear here. You're the coolest looking police officer I know, with the cool hair. You look like you came out of the MoMA. I don't know, like as a designer or something, but continue, please.
Sometimes I feel like I'm not technologically savvy enough either,
Yeah.
You turn to a kid and you say, how do you do this? So there really isn't a typical victim, and absolutely socioeconomic, none of that matters. None of that matters, right? It doesn't matter. You could be greedy and have no money, and you could be greedy and have all the money in the world. It just whether or not you're going to be victimized, right?
Absolutely.
And then you mentioned in your question, sort of like, what are the factors? Like when it comes to some of the frauds, like can we talk about romance frauds for a second?
Yeah,
like
let's do it. No.
And
let's give them an explanation on what romance frauds are too.
Yeah. So romance frauds are nothing new. They're kind of trendy at the moment when it comes to, there's some documentaries on romance frauds and things like that. There's Dirty John. There's others that I've seen on Netflix and things. And they're all really, really interesting. Yeah. And you kind of think to yourself, okay, so those are done. Everybody knows about romance frauds. Why are people still falling prey for romance frauds? Well, there's a whole bunch of different reasons. And what's interesting is that the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre is an agency that we work with. They're run by the OPP and the RCMP, and they're statistically driven. They gather stats, they don't investigate, but they do sometimes pass things on to different agencies based on where things are occurring, just so that we're all on the same page. They have a great website full of resources for people when they're not sure. Mm-hmm. So they're federal. So they're dealing with everything from across Canada. So they say that, and they're dealing with fraud. So then when they say these are our top 10 frauds, romance, all sorts of different frauds, the typical things, the CRA frauds, now the COVID frauds, things like that. Shawn mentioned PPE, vaccination, special filters that'll clean your house from any type of virus, things like that. Those are all out there at the moment, and they're not going anywhere. Okay, they're in place. Yeah. So the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre will say that they believe that 5% of frauds are being reported to them. So when they have their end of year numbers, they're only representing 5% of frauds. They say when it comes to romance, they believe only 1% of frauds are being reported to them. Wow. So in 2020, it's a really low number, just 1%. So you'd think, well, that total of victimization is going to be low. So when you look at their stats for 2020, when it comes to romance frauds, their losses came up to $18.5 million for 2020, just romance scam. That's 1%. So if you believe that if it's actually 1%, that comes up to like a $2 billion loss just for romance scams, just in Canada.
Do you think it's a pride thing? Do you think it's a pride thing? The victims just don't want to talk about it because they're like, this is an emotional thing. I'm trying to pay money for love right now. It's like 90 Day Fiance, and I'll never see my person on the other side. Do you think that's one of the reasons?
So it's one of the reasons. They might not know to report it. They have pride, they have face. They also maybe believe that they weren't victimized. Yeah. That person loved them. Yeah, you know what? They victimized all those other people, but not me. They really did love me. It didn't work out because it didn't work out, but nothing to do with the fraud, right? So they're not believing it, right? And it happens to anybody. So quick little story. I have a friend who's a senior officer within Toronto Police. And he calls me up one day and he says, do you have a second to chat? I'll pop by your office. You know, face mask and all. He comes into the office. He tells me it's about a romance scam. So I asked my friend who's in the office, Kevin Williams. He's in our mass marketing section. He deals with a ton of romance scams, and it's all mass marketing stuff. So it's stuff that's just being blitzed out one way or another, right? So we sit down with this officer. He's a senior officer, and he says, so I'm dealing with a family member. She needs my help. I go in to help her out. She's got email problems and computer problems. So as I'm cleaning it out, I come across these emails between my family member and this gentleman who's saying, I love you and everything else. And it's the typical romance scam. And he identifies it and he says to her, hey, what's going on here? Oh, I met this guy through whatever means, and we've got a little pen pal relationship going. And he goes, no, you're a victim of a romance scam. She wanted nothing to do with it. She didn't believe that she was victimized. She says, nope, This is true. This is real. I'm not sending him money.
Yeah.
So it's got nothing to do with the romance scam. So it continued on. He thought he had nipped it, erased the whole thing, got rid of the guy's contact info. It's gone. Fast forward a little while later, he receives an email from his family member who, by accident, sent the email to him, meant to send it to the guy, right?
Okay.
Meant to send it to the guy who's the suspect of this romance scam. And he sees this email and he goes, oh my God, this is still going. So he goes up to her again and he said, is this still happening? She goes, oops, okay, yeah, I didn't mean to send that to you, but yes, it's still happening. I'm not sending him money. But here's the part that, I wasn't aware was even possibly a thing. What she did was now she took the email conversations between she and this gentleman, and she's sending it to her friends saying, look what I'm doing. Look what I'm involved in. This is great. I've got a romantic relationship going on with this guy.
Yeah.
And you could have that too. So she's unknowingly luring her friends to partake in the romance scams.
Oh my god.
So it's like this guy didn't even need to do much work.
No,
being spread out.
Yeah, she's helping him. Oh my.
Yeah. That's sort of like the next element to it that I didn't realize would even be a factor.
And I think that's one of the things why, these types of crimes aren't seen as so gory per se, right? Because when you see like there's a shooting, there's a murder, it's literally physically in front of you. But when it comes to this is an emotional hurt. This is a financial hurt. This is a sense of privacy that gets taken away from you, and that actually really messes with you. If I could swear right now, it really you up. You know what I mean? Like that really messes you up as an individual, and I think. You have huge trust issues after that. I mean, Shawn, I think same thing, on your end, like you probably have seen people's entire systems get cleaned out. And I wonder what do they do after that or what happens when that happens?
Absolutely. Like some of the ways that people are victimized, especially if it's a business, it can destroy the entire business. If you have a business email compromise where they get in your email and then they intercept a wire transfer, for instance, you may not be able to financially recover from that.
Yeah.
And I think Val hit the nail on the head earlier when she said it's a trust thing, right? Like it's devastating on a personal level, and it would affect your ability to trust anybody in any way going forward, whether it's like a tech crime like that or against your business or especially with a romance scam as well. The romance scams that I've seen lately are starting to pivot in that they're telling people to invest in cryptocurrency. I've got this cryptocurrency exchange that I've been dealing with. I've been making lots of money. I'm not asking you for money. I'm telling you how you can make money. You should invest in this platform. And then they do. And of course, it's a scam and they're losing tens of thousands.
It's some like multi-level type of fraud / romance. Like it's a romance fraud and also like a scam from a money standpoint. Oh my gosh, there's so many levels to that can be layered upon and really mess, not just emotionally, but financially. Oh, wow.
These guys really pivot to new technology and new situations like COVID very quickly. Yeah. It's hard to stay on top of.
I mean, one of my most favorite entertaining things during COVID is actually watching YouTubers online, call them out on whether it's from a fraud standpoint or another cybercrime. So would love, your thoughts on those YouTubers doing those things. What do you think about it?
Oh, some of them are so good at it, aren't they?
Oh, they're great.
I get the phone calls on my cell phone every so often from someone claiming that they're with the CRA and my SIN number has been compromised. And I play along with those calls on a regular basis because I like to see how they do it.
Oh, yeah.
Because it helps me be able to tell people how to avoid it. The more time they spend with me, obviously, the less time they're spending scamming other people. I've had situations where I've gone to pick up my kids and I'm on the phone with one of these scammers telling them I'm driving to the Bitcoin ATM to get them money. And I let my kids listen to it as well because, you know, some of the guys, like the scammers, are very charismatic. But the YouTubers that waste their time, they're very, very good at it as well. Like they're very tech savvy guys who they're getting into like the scammers' computers and they're tying the scammers up for hours and hours. It is very entertaining.
How about you, Val?
I get those phone calls. I get them at work on my work line. And I just,
Do you just do one of these and like kick back and then like get on the call and go, here we go? Like,
speakerphone and let's see what happens. Yeah, you know what? But this, you know, like Shawn said, they're very charismatic. This is their full-time gig. Whether a fraudster's a fraudster, they live that life. It's amazing sometimes when you speak to some of them, you have them in handcuffs, arrested in front of you, and they are so good at what they do that you start thinking for half a second, is this the wrong guy? Nope, no. He got me. This is the right guy. This is the right guy. I'm not going to fall for it. I had one guy, he was a romance, like you said, Axel, he was a romance, Ponzi, investment guy, all balled into one. So he was very good at what he did. He looked the part. He looked amazing. And the joke was, you know, of course, now he's pled guilty. Mm-hmm. He's in jail. He's in an institution. And a freelance writer from the Toronto Life, she goes, I'm going to go interview him. I'm going to go visit him. I said, listen, 2 things. Don't marry him. And don't give them all your money. These guys are amazing. It's their full-time gig.
You know what? I bet you in the underbelly of the underworld, there's an Oscar for best, you know, scammer, scam artist, fraud out there. And they're holding that plaque with pride, unfortunately. So, you know, let's get in the minds of these scammers. Now, we're talking a lot about the victims. Let's talk about the scammers. What you know, I'm sure you've interviewed them before and you yourselves know them best in terms of the psychology of how they operate, the organizations that they work in. Now, what, you know, qualifies as a scammer? What led them there usually? And also what kind of aspects do they need to have to be, I guess, a successful one from what you've seen?
So
just being charismatic.
I think it all depends. Yeah, right. It just yeah, exactly. Being able to schmooze. No, I think it all depends. So when we're dealing with the guys who are phoning you for the CRA scam and they're phoning from what you can very, very easily determine is like just an office full of phones and people making the same calls. When you finally get to talk to those guys, they've been told that insurance will cover everything, right? They get some kickbacks for the money that they get from the victimization. Mm-hmm. But the ones who actually have a good heart, who just need money for whatever reason, they're kind of lied to, right? They're told, no, those people are going to be fine. Insurance, the banks, everybody's going to cover them. Everything's going to be okay. So they can sleep at night over things like that, right? You know, their bosses, they know full well what the true story is, and it's not going to go down that way. And people are going to be at a loss. And if it's too much of a loss, they're never going to come back. But the people on the phone, they don't know that. And some of them do, and they just don't care. Right? They think, whatever, I just need money and I'm going to do what I need. It's like a survival thing. The guys who are a little bit higher, you know, and the one that I was speaking about earlier, he believed it. He knows that his story's not right, but he believed it right to the part. So everything that he would say to his victims, and even anything that he'd said to me down the road, was loosely based on fact. He took that little nugget and then he just elaborated from there. And he built a story and he built a life around it. And all the money that he got from his frauds, which is multi-mil, he just lived off a lifestyle. And that's why he looked the part from head to toe, dressed in the right clothes, dressed in the right, smelt the right way, drove the right car, said the right things, went to the right restaurants in the right neighborhood. So they are living the life. It's actually a fascinating thing on the standpoint of an investigator, because you're looking from the outside in and you're going, man, this guy believes it. And they spend time in jail and they spend time with other people who are doing the same thing, and they're learning off of each other. So they I'm not going to say I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist of any type, so I can't diagnose anybody. But there's something there, right? Something that ticks in there that has them believing that what they're doing is okay for whatever reason.
That's crazy. It's funny because I literally just finished rewatching Fire Festival, and I don't know if you are. Yeah, I'm sure you both are very familiar with it. Everybody's laughing. They're like, we know. One of the greatest, worst events to ever happen for everybody that didn't go. So, I mean, horrible situation. That's a great example of fraud. A great example of cyber too, in terms of like, I remember there was that part where they loaded up their wristbands with money. And it was just a whole lot of stuff that they were just like, I think like, it was like $2 million worth of cash was put on these wristbands, and they were like, you know, there's frauds in terms of like buying a cabana that never existed and things like that. And it's just, as we talk more and more, I just realized that my entire Netflix curriculum has been fraud and cybercrime. So I'm glad we're making that realization right now. So yeah, but I guess for Shawn, you know, in our heads, is the cybercrime this, you know, a non-face with a hoodie, you know, doing their thing on a laptop? Is that what, you know, that's what the cinemas have told us, you know, that's what Hollywood has told us. What do you actually see?
So I see a pretty broad spectrum of people that offend that way. There's a lot of teenagers, for instance, that when we catch them and when we go and arrest them and you ask them like, why'd you do it? They usually have the same answer, and it's to see if I could. Because they're not really associating the criminal consequence to what they're doing. They're just playing around with cybersecurity, and they're just pushing the envelope and seeing how far they can take something without realizing that they're actually victimizing other people when they do that. And then you've got I've got another case for a guy who was cyber attacking Canadian media companies like the National Post and the Toronto Sun. Because he'd been arrested for fraud out in BC, and all of these news agencies had done like news reports about him at the time, and he was trying to get them erased off the internet so he could start his life over. And when the media agencies wouldn't do it, he would cyber attack them until they took the news articles down.
Oh my God.
So in his mind, because I talked to him a few times, in his mind, you know, he believed he was doing the right thing because he was just trying to get his life back on track.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he was taking down a bunch of very prominent websites in Canada for an extended period of time. He's victimizing all of these people, but in his mind, it's okay because he's doing the right thing.
Of course.
I'm sure it's probably the same for fraudsters too.
No, absolutely. It's funny. So I, background on me, I did computer science, and one of the classes that was most memorable to me at U of T was ethics. An ethics class, because we had the power in our hands, you know, of like learning the knowledge of, like you said, your victims was like, we just want to go in to just see if we could do it, you know, just see if we can pop in and, you know, break through whatever firewall or, you know, security that they do have. You know, it's just I think it's just our younger selves are just like, might as well, let's just try it out. You know, it'd be cool, but we, you know, people don't understand that. And I think the ethics class at least helped us realize what exactly we were doing. I think one of our assignments, which was pretty cool, was if you were working at a company, what's the worst cybercrime you could do? And we had to present it to the front of the class on exactly how we would do it. And it was funny, at the company I was working at the time, I showed them, because I was just I was interning there, and I showed them what happened or what I was going to do, and they laughed. And then my manager took me aside and he goes, don't do that though, please. please don't do that. But it's a lot of power. It's a lot of power.
There's a lot of companies now that offer programs. They call it a bug bounty, right? Where if you are a hacker, you can go in and see if you can find a vulnerability in Facebook, and then you tell Facebook about it, and Facebook will give you money because you're saving them, you know, from being attacked in the future.
And I think that's where the lines get crossed, though, because we hear stories like this and they're like, well, maybe if I hack in here, I'm going to get a job, or, you know, I'm going to be, you know, whoever's new security rep because of what I do. But at the same time, it's still affecting people. So, you know, that world is a little hard to read between the lines sometimes, because like you said, there are those companies that are just like, come at us. Let's see what happens.
Absolutely. So as a result, you've got hackers that are everybody from 16-year-old kids who don't really know what they're doing, but they're trying their best, to nation state level hackers that are employed by some other countries to go after infrastructure and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Like, you know,
Those are the guys. Those are the guys in the hoodies.
those are the hoodies taking down entire hydro, electric, systems and grids. And we're like, what just happened? You're going to start another war, things like that. And that's really scary that can happen. So yeah, wow. I love this conversation. Anybody that's watching is watching me smile. It's not because I like what's happening. I love just the conversation itself. Don't worry. I'm here. I'm a good boy.
I'm not here giving you ideas.
Exactly. No ideas, everybody. Because, I personally think in schools, they should be teaching some sort of ethics here, regardless of the knowledge that you have. If it's a deep coding background, it's a deep financial background, because you can get sneaky and do stuff. But until ethics are really, put as a base of knowledge, I think it's just our minds roam free and we think we can do whatever we want. We get excited by the cinema. So we start to do, the Wolf of Wall Streets. We start to do the crazy anon stuff that we think is cool, quote unquote. But again, we don't understand because we're not educated as much. But I believe you both are in organizations or work with organizations that do help.
Absolutely. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre does a very good job of educating people about fraud. Fraud Prevention Month last month, for example. But then there's some other organizations that we deal with. RCMP has a National Cybercrime Coordination Center that also pushes out information, not only like cybersecurity for individuals and for businesses, but also like cyber hygiene. And there's some other groups that push out information on how you can actually participate in these bug bounty programs. Like if you're going to do these things, they had an instant or a program in Toronto a little while ago where they were looking at missing person cases. Mm-hmm. So they had historical missing person cases. Let's get together and leverage our resources to see how many of them we can solve. And they actually managed to resolve a bunch of them by finding people on social media.
It's like a hackathon.
Things like,
interesting.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly, right? And some of the people were not missing more so much, they just didn't really want to be found.
Got it.
And they end up getting found on social media because everyone's posting how great their life is on Facebook all the time. So, they're able to leverage their skills that way. And I think groups like that are sort of doing good with it have a bright future for us.
Absolutely. Powerful, for the bad side, but also when you bring it to the good, there's so much good that can actually be done there with that power. So amazing. And then as for fraud, what organizations does Toronto Police work with?
As Shawn mentioned, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre we work with. We work with the Ontario Securities Commission. Mm-hmm. And we also work with the Better Business Bureau of Canada. And we have the Competition Bureau of Canada. And they're the ones who spearhead the Fraud Prevention Month every March of every year. So together, we've got some other stakeholders as well that we deal with. But, we try our best to get the word out there to reduce victimization, to just educate. We're trying to reduce victimization. That's the bottom line, right? We're trying to teach people, hey, listen, this is what can happen. Let's nip it before it happens. We'd rather prevent it than have to deal with it afterwards, because like we've talked about, just a little thing of just somebody taking over your SIN, somebody hacking into an account and having to deal with the credit bureaus and things like that, that will take you months to just deal with it. And it's kind of like, okay, well, they say I need this to get rid of it, but they've already taken that, right? So what am I supposed to do? So they just kind of like spin their wheels until finally, and now their money's kind of frozen, their money's sitting there and they can't access anything. So it is a huge headache for any type of victim, for the smallest fraud. We talked about it at the beginning. They feel stupid, they feel foolish, they clicked on the link. But, we also can't forget that sometimes there's an actual science behind the victimization. And it's more than just telling someone, don't do it, don't click, just like this lady that we talked about, this family member who was all wrapped up in that romance scam, luckily didn't send a penny over to this gentleman, to this bad guy, right? He was working on it, just didn't happen. She had the wits about herself to just not send that money. Exactly. But one research that I came across that I thought was super interesting is there's an anthropologist at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and she did a study, a research on 100 people who were madly in love. And you think to yourself, okay, well, what is that going to do? Well, she took those people, they're madly in love, she puts them in and conducts MRI tests on all of them. And then what they've recognized is that when you're madly in love, your brain actually changes. There are certain parts of your brain and the activity changes. And what happens is that it's now sort of like, somebody will say, I felt like I was brainwashed while I was going through that scam. I just couldn't do it properly. So the activity in your brain that changes when you're madly in love, it stops you from, it's not necessarily your common sense. It's a matter of you realizing that you're able to be, you can deceive yourself, and it's easier for other people to deceive you. So you might feed me a line right now, but if I'm in love with you, Axel, and I'm just going to want to believe it, right? I just want to believe it because I love you, right?
Exactly.
So, of course,
I'm like crying inside thinking about every single time I was in that position and be like, no problem. It's because I love you. I'll do it. No worries. I'll drive 5 hours to drop off like that book. No problem. No worries. I don't have an exam. That's fine. We'll go.
Because I love you.
Exactly.
Because I love you.
Yeah.
So you think to yourself, why would someone fall for that? But it's their brain has actually shifted, not allowing them to think all the way through. Their common sense is kind of shut down. You'll drive the 5 hours to deliver the book, right? And you'll fail that exam that you studied for the last 3 months.
Yep.
And it's going to be okay. And then at the end, luckily it's a book and not $1 million.
Yes.
And then at the end, when you're no longer in love and your brain kind of comes back and you go, how did I possibly fall for that?
Yeah.
Right?
I want my sweaters back, Val. I want my sweaters back. Okay. I miss those
like
sweaters. But it's so true.
So it's, when it comes to, Shawn mentioned, we're not in the business of victim blaming. Our victims behave a certain way based on what's happening to them. This is a scientific reaction to love, and there are all sorts of different things. So, we're always there for our victims. That's the whole point of what we do. So if we can prevent any of it so they don't have to go through all of that, that's our main goal at the end.
No, that's amazing. And I love that because, and I think for anybody listening, they really should take it to heart that, again, it's you're being just being a nice person. You're being an honest person. You're trying to be a helpful person. And you're just caught in the crossfires of some bad people trying to do some bad things. And, I think this is a great note to leave it on. So is there anything else you two want to say about your specific departments or people you work with, as well as to any of the possible victims out there to look out for? What are some things that you want to say?
Well, for my perspective, if you have a business or if you have, even personally, if you've been victimized, I encourage people to report it to police because sometimes, if your business gets hacked, you want to get, your business back up and running. You want to get your website going again. You want to start fulfilling orders. People don't necessarily even associate that to reporting it to the police. But if you take the GO train in every day to work and someone is in that GO train lot during the day and they're breaking into cars and stealing money, the police don't know that there's a problem unless people tell them. And it's the same with hacking incidents as well. We're not going to catch these guys and hold them accountable if people don't report it, because no one holds all the keys, all the pieces of the puzzle to arresting these guys. Everyone's got little tiny bits and pieces here and there. And sometimes, we need 10, 15 people to report the same version of ransomware in order for us to be able to start being able to attribute it to somebody.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to report this stuff so that we can do our job, right? Let us help you.
100%. And I feel the exact same way. Oftentimes the victim will say to us, I didn't want to bother you by phoning and just even asking for advice. That's what we're here for. We're happy to shut it down before it starts. If I get that phone call and that person says to me, this is what's happening, is this a fraud? And I'm so much happier that they phoned me before they actually sent the money, before they clicked on that link, before they did anything like that, right? Or they thought they were stuck. I had to do it. No, you didn't have to do anything. So when they phone us, and they can phone any police station, they can phone directly to an officer's desk, they can call the front desk, whatever they want. An officer's always happy to help and prevent, rather than, okay, come on in for that statement. Because now, whether it's a fraud, whether it's anything else, right? Any type of crime, really that's what we're here for, right? We're peacekeepers. We want to keep the peace. We don't want people to lose out on anything. So just pick up the phone call. It's never an inconvenience. That's what we're here for.
I love that. That's a common theme, I think, out of all the episodes that I've had with TPS and everybody that works with TPS is that just call. You know, that's why you're there. That's why you have this job. You're here to help. And you know, I think, you know, both of you just watch out for a text from me when I'm at night crying and I see a link on my phone and I go, hey guys, I'm not sure what this is. I'm just kidding. No, but serious, you'll get a text. Anyways, everybody, this is 24 Shades of Blue. This is Valerie. This is Shawn. Thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to talk more. I hope there's a part 2 of this because I want to talk for hours. But that's it. 24 Shades of Blue out.